Time is flowing, right? You feel it when a moment passes. You age, your coffee cools, the stars burn out. But what if time doesn't actually pass? What if every moment, your birth, your death, every second in between, is already frozen in the fabric of reality? Not unfolding, not becoming, just being. You're not moving through time, you're embedded in it. This is not science fiction. This is the block universe where the past, present, and future all coexist eternally. No free will, no change, no becoming, just an eternal, four-dimensional prison of moments. And the most haunting question of all, if this is true, are we trapped in a 4D illusion we can never escape? Please like and subscribe, because this journey will change how you see our place in the universe. Prepare yourselves. We begin. We begin with a lie so seductive, so embedded in our daily breath, that few ever question it. That time flows. You wake up, the sun rises, you age, slowly. Moments fall behind you like breadcrumbs. The future lies ahead, unwritten. The past, dead, dusty, and yet, every theory that dared to describe the deeper structure of reality keeps whispering the same defiance. Time is not flowing. It's standing still. Einstein didn't just revolutionize physics with his theory of relativity. He redefined our understanding of time itself. He told us not with poetry, but with mathematics that time is a dimension. Just like width, just like height, just like depth. It doesn't flow, it island. Imagine a map. You stand at a certain point, in a certain city, at a specific street corner. That's your now. But the other cities exist too. They are not erased simply because you are not standing there. In the same way, yesterday and tomorrow are still there. You just happen to be here. What Einstein showed is this: time is relative. Your now might be someone else's past. Someone moving fast enough, far enough, could disagree with you about the order of events, about what comes first, or even whether two events happened at the same time at all. It breaks every rule your mind was trained to believe. But it's real, and it's been experimentally verified. Time dilation is no longer just theory. It's been measured in speeding airplanes, atomic clocks, even satellites orbiting Earth. If time was truly absolute, these differences couldn't exist. But they do, and that opens a door to something much stranger. Because if simultaneity is relative, then so is the present. And if the present isn't universal, then there is no objective now. Pause. Let that land. The idea that there is a single ticking moment that all of us share, from distant galaxies to your kitchen clock, is an illusion. The universe doesn't operate on present tense. It operates on coordinates. 4 of them, 3 spatial, 1 temporal, x, y, z, and t. And in this model known as spacetime, time is not a flowing river. It is a frozen landscape. You're not moving through it. You're fixed within it. A bead on a thread, a still frame in a cosmic film. From the Big Bang to your last heartbeat, every moment exists, equally real, equally eternal. And this brings us to a paradox so profound, it threatens to rewrite your sense of being. If every moment in time is already there, then what does that say about your life? Your choices? Your freedom? Is the future waiting to be created? Or is it already there, just unseen? This is the foundation of the block universe. And once you begin to see through this lens, everything changes. In the next section, we enter this strange structure, not a universe in motion, but a universe already complete. And we ask, if time doesn't pass, what does it mean to exist at all? Imagine standing on a mountaintop, looking out over a vast frozen landscape. Every peak and valley, every forest and river all present at once. From above, nothing moves. But if you were inside that landscape, your vision narrowed to a narrow path, you would feel like you were journeying through it. That's us. That's time. And that's the block universe. This model of reality doesn't treat time as something that flows. It doesn't believe in a moving now or a growing future. Instead, it paints a picture so alien, so cold and precise that it almost feels cruel. Everything that has happened and will ever happen is already there, not becoming, just being. The block universe is not a metaphor. It is a direct consequence of Einstein's spacetime, the fabric of the cosmos, stitched from time and space alike. If you accept relativity, if you accept the speed of light as a cosmic speed limit, then you must accept that the universe doesn't distinguish between past, present, and future. All events are part of one four-dimensional structure. To visualize it, think of a loaf of bread. Each slice represents a moment in time, but the whole loaf, all the slices, all at once, is the universe. You, as a conscious being, experience just one slice at a time, but the rest of the loaf still exists. Your birth, your greatest heartbreak, your last breath, all baked into the block, already there. From this perspective, motion is an illusion, change is an illusion, becoming is an illusion. You are not a creature moving through time. You are a creature fixed in time, frozen at your coordinates. Your sense of movement, of growth, of progress is the result of memory and perception, not cosmic truth. Even more chilling is what this says about your identity. You are not a single self traveling through time. You are an entire timeline. You are your first step and your last goodbye, and every breath in between, equally alive, equally real, equally eternal. This model also has consequences for causality. If all events exist, then cause and effect are merely labels we assign based on our position in the block. Your decision to drink coffee this morning wasn't made today. It already existed. It always existed. Free will begins to rot in this structure. Choice is exposed as geometry. You didn't choose a path. You are a path, a line drawn in four-dimensional space. But the block universe is not a fringe fantasy. It is baked into the math of relativity. It is silently embedded in the physics textbooks. Physicists like Hermann Minkowski, Einstein's own mentor, were already calling time a dimension in the early 1900s. Einstein himself once wrote, "The distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." And here's the catch. If the future already exists, then it can no longer be said to unfold. It's simply island, like the tip of a mountain hidden by fog, invisible from where you stand, but already carved, waiting, unchanging. This is the essence of eternalism, a philosophical position that says all points in time, past, present, future, are equally real, and the block universe is its scientific counterpart, cold, mathematical, unfeeling, and yet strangely beautiful. It suggests a cosmos not of chaos and decay, but of perfect symmetry. A sculpture, not a stream. A painting, not a performance. You do not happen. You are, and yet this vision of the universe breeds discomfort. We are creatures addicted to change, to narrative, to struggle and triumph. But what if all our stories have already been told? What if we are living within a masterpiece we cannot alter, only experience in pieces? In the next section, the implications grow heavier, because if your entire life is fixed, then your freedom may be nothing more than a beautiful illusion. And in the block universe, illusions are all we have. You believe you chose to click this video. You believe that tomorrow, you could choose a different life, move cities, change careers, fall in love, walk away. But what if all of that was already etched into space-time? What if choice was not something you possess, but something you experience, like scenery outside a train window? This is the most unsettling implication of the block universe. The idea that free will does not exist, not in any meaningful sense. Not because a god decreed your fate, not because your biology wrote your story, but because in the four-dimensional structure of space-time, your entire life is already there. From the moment of the Big Bang, every event, cosmic or trivial, tragic or triumphant, was set, including the one you're living right now. In this model, the past didn't lead to the present. The present didn't give rise to the future. There is no becoming. There is only being. The universe is not writing itself as it goes. It's already written. And you're a sentence permanent, precise, unchangeable. This defies our deepest instincts. We feel like we make choices. We feel like the future is open, undecided. But so did the character in a novel, right up until the final page. Many physicists, philosophers, and neuroscientists have wrestled with this paradox. If the future is as real as the past, then it isn't being constructed. It already exists. That job interview next month, that heartbreak 10 years from now, already encoded into the fabric of space-time. The block universe doesn't offer you multiple paths. It offers you one, not because you chose it, but because you are it. This is the death of free will, not by force, but by geometry. And yet, it doesn't feel like geometry. You agonize over a decision. You second guess. You regret. You forgive. So where does that feeling come from? Why do we experience choice if it doesn't exist? Some argue it's a matter of perspective. Like a movie character unaware the script is finished. You, embedded within the block, experience the illusion of flow, of decision. But to an observer outside the block, if such a view were even possible, your timeline is already whole, beginning to end. Others blame biology. Your brain constructs the illusion of agency because it's evolutionarily useful. A creature that feels in control is more motivated to survive. But that doesn't make the control real. It just makes it adaptive. There's also the problem of causality. If time is a static structure, then causes don't cause anything. They merely are. Your heartbreak didn't lead to your depression. Your depression and heartbreak coexist in the block, coordinated, not causal, like two stars bound by gravity, but frozen in place. This clashes with our stories. Every novel, every myth, every moment of our lives is framed in arcs, decisions, consequences, growth. But the block universe reduces all of that to a four-dimensional statue. Beautiful, precise, but cold and silent. Yet some find liberation in this. If everything is set, then perhaps there is no failure, no guilt, no shame. What happened was always going to happen. You were always going to rise, fall, break, heal, not because you failed or succeeded, but because that's where your timeline exists. Still, many resist. They want a loophole, a crack in the crystal, a way to claw back autonomy. Some look to quantum mechanics for rescue, others to consciousness itself. Surely something must escape the block, right? In the next section, we chase that hope. We dive into the only thing that feels truly alive in a frozen universe, consciousness, and ask, if everything is fixed, why does it still feel like we're waking up inside a dream? You open your eyes. A moment arrives. It feels fresh. It feels real. You are here, now, but in the block universe, there is no now. There is no you that moves through anything. All your moments, every heartbeat, every decision, every awakening, are frozen in the eternal sculpture of space-time. So what then is consciousness? This is where the illusion deepens. Because if you are embedded in a frozen block, a lifeless four-dimensional object without flow, without choice, then the greatest mystery is not time. It is awareness, the vivid, electric hum of being. Consciousness feels dynamic. It feels alive. It feels like something is happening. But if nothing actually happens in the block universe, what is the thing that's pretending to? Some theories suggest that consciousness is not moving through time. It's illuminating slices of it. Like a flashlight moving across the pages of a book, awareness lights up one frame at a time. Not because the frames are changing, but because you are, or at least, you feel like you are. This is the moving spotlight theory, a compromise between eternalism and experience. The block is fixed, but consciousness scans across it. One slice, then another, creating the illusion of motion. But who or what is holding the flashlight? That question haunts the boundaries of science and metaphysics, because in a truly frozen universe, there's nowhere for that motion to come from. No engine, no traveler, only point, coordinates. Some argue consciousness is a feature of certain regions of the block, like a fire that burns only in specific corners of spacetime, where the conditions are just right. Biology, neurons, patterns, consciousness arises, not to move, but to be, to exist, briefly, as an awareness at a single point, and then silence. In this model, your entire conscious life is not a stream. It's a constellation of glowing dots, each one a moment of awareness. You don't move from one to the next. You just are in each one. The experience of continuity, that's memory, a data structure within the moment, a trick played by a brain that doesn't know it's standing still. It is a disturbing thought that your entire self, your growth, your memories, your traumas, your triumphs, are just still images with embedded scripts. No one is reading them. No one is navigating them. They just exist. But some scientists propose a different view, that consciousness is not in time, but that time is in consciousness. They suggest that what we perceive as external, objective time may actually be a projection of awareness itself, that the sequence of moments, the flow of events, are not features of the cosmos, but features of the mind. This flips the block universe on its head. It says, maybe the block doesn't trap you. Maybe you create the block, or at least your experience of it. And here, quantum physics creeps back into the conversation. Because at the subatomic level, nothing is truly fixed. Particles don't seem to have definite states until observed. And observation, awareness, changes the outcome. Could consciousness then be more than a witness? Could it be a participant in the shaping of what feels like time? Some philosophers go even further. They propose that consciousness is non-local, not tied to any one frame, not bound by coordinate. A field, not a point. An ocean, not a ripple. But even these ideas are haunted by the same paradox. If the block exists, if all moments are equally real, if nothing becomes, then why do you feel like you're becoming? Why do you grieve, love, evolve, hope? Why does your life still feel like a story? Even if it's already ended, the block universe gives no answer. It's simply island, unflinching, absolute, indifferent. But perhaps in that indifference lies something beautiful. Perhaps consciousness isn't moving through time. Perhaps it's remembering itself across frames, across illusion, across eternity. In the next section, we turn to a physical explanation for this illusion, a force you've heard of your entire life, a force that may hold the secret to why the past feels different from the future, and why you can never go back. It is the arrow that only points one way, the ghost that haunts every broken glass. Entropy. You drop a glass, it shatters. The shards scatter across the floor. You watch it unfold, knowing without a doubt that it will never reassemble itself. Why? Because time has an arrow, a direction, obvious, forward. But why does time move forward? Why not backward? Why not sideways? In the cold, geometric stillness of the block universe, there is no motion at all, no direction, no ticking clock. Every frame is frozen, every moment eternal. So where does the arrow of time come from? One word, entropy. Entropy is the measure of disorder in a system. It tells you how jumbled, chaotic, and irreversible something island. A glass unbroken on a table is low entropy. A glass shattered on the floor is high entropy. And the universe from the Big Bang until now has been marching steadily from order to disorder. This is the second law of thermodynamics, and it is one of the few laws in all of physics that has a preferred direction. Not because the law itself chooses, but because of probability. There are far more ways for a system to be messy than to be neat, far more ways for the pieces to be broken than assembled. So, left to its own devices, the universe drifts toward disorder, not by intention, not by will, just by math. This statistical truth creates the illusion of time's flow. You remember the past because it had lower entropy. You forget the future because it hasn't yet been scrambled. Your brain itself, your memory, Your awareness is a machine that writes entropy. It creates order in the midst of chaos, and then loses it again. But entropy isn't fundamental. It's not a building block of nature. It's an emergent property, like weather or traffic. It arises when many simple rules collide into complexity, which means the arrow of time may be an illusion, a local byproduct of a lopsided universe. Because here's the twist. The fundamental laws of physics are time-symmetric. They don't care if you run the equations forward or backward. To the equations, the movie of your life looks the same whether you rewind it or play it. But you don't. You scream when the glass shatters, not when it reforms. So where does this asymmetry come from? Some believe it lies in the universe's initial conditions. The Big Bang was a moment of incredibly low entropy, an almost impossibly ordered state. And from that cosmic seed, disorder has bloomed in every direction. Galaxies formed, stars burned, planets cooled, brains evolved, memories formed, and the illusion of a flowing time emerged. But what if the Big Bang wasn't the beginning? What if it was the middle? Some theories suggest a mirror universe on the other side of time, one where entropy increases in the opposite direction. A cosmos flowing backward from our perspective, but perfectly normal in its own. Two universes, back to back, both obeying the second law, but in opposite time directions. Twin arrows in a frozen block. Still, for us, the arrow feels absolute. We're born, we grow, we age, we never go back, we never rewind. And that sensation of forwardness is deeply tied to entropy's increase. Your body burns energy. Your mind erases states. You are an engine of entropy. You don't just live in the arrow of time. You are part of what gives it shape. And yet, this arrow is not a property of the block. It's a property of your position inside the block. From a higher view, a God's eye view, there is no forward, no backward, just structure, a frozen, perfectly still architecture. The arrow exists only within, only where consciousness, entropy, and causality dance together. This is the ultimate paradox. Time's direction feels so obvious, so natural, so unstoppable, but it might be a hallucination, a side effect, a story your brain tells to make sense of its place in a statistical sea. And so we must ask, if time's arrow is just a local illusion, what about change itself? What about possibility? In the next section, we turn to the strangest realm of all, where particles blink in and out of existence, where possibilities collapse into facts, and where the future might not be as fixed as the block suggests. We dive into the quantum, the glitch in the block. In the grand cathedral of physics, there is a crack in the stone, a shimmering uncertainty that pulses beneath the precision of equations. It is here, at the smallest scale imaginable, that the universe refuses to behave. This is the quantum realm, and it may be the one place where the block universe trembles. While relativity gives us a world of geometry, fixed, eternal, four-dimensional, quantum mechanics whispers of something more elusive. A reality built not on certainty, but on probability, on states that are not yet determined, on particles that do not exist in one place, but in all possible places, until they are observed. This single word, observed, has shattered minds for over a century. In the quantum world, a particle doesn't have a single location. It exists in a superposition, a cloud of potential. Only when measured does it collapse into a definite state. But collapse into what? And when? And why? In the block universe, every moment already exists. Every event is already there. There is no branching. No, could have been. But in quantum theory, outcomes are not locked in until the very act of measurement. A radioactive atom has not decayed, or not decayed. It is in both states, until you look. Only then does reality snap into place. This throws a wrench into the eternalist machinery, because if events are fixed, then why do probabilities still resolve? Enter the infamous thought experiment, Schrödinger's cat, a cat in a box, both alive and dead until you check. In the block universe, The cat is either dead or alive, not both. But quantum mechanics seems to demand a universe where multiple outcomes exist simultaneously until one is selected. So which is it? Some physicists try to reconcile the two worlds with the many worlds interpretation. They argue that every possible outcome of a quantum event does happen, just in different branches of the universe. You open the box. In one universe, the cat is dead. In another, alive. The block still exists, but it is infinitely fractal. A multiverse of blocks, each one self-contained, each one frozen. Every possibility realized somewhere. Others turn to the transactional interpretation, a model where quantum events are waves that move both forward and backward in time, forming a handshake across space-time. A particle decides where to go by exchanging information with its own future. In this view, events are woven together not in a linear flow, but in a self-consistent tapestry, still a block, but a self-aware one, where past and future communicate. And then there's the idea that consciousness plays a role in collapse, that the act of observation is more than passive, that it's creative, participatory, that maybe, just maybe, the observer and the observed are entangled in a deeper way than we realize. If true, this could fracture the block entirely, or rewrite it from the inside. But these interpretations are not answers. They are frameworks, attempts, prayers whispered into the dark corners of understanding. Because here's the deeper truth. Relativity and quantum mechanics do not get along. They are two great pillars of physics, and yet they speak different languages. One speaks of smooth curves in space-time, the other of abrupt jumps in possibility. One is a sculpture, the other a dice game. The effort to unify them to build a theory of everything has haunted physicists for decades. String theory, loop quantum gravity, emergent space-time. Each offers glimpses, but no final vision. And so we stand at the threshold. The block universe explains time as a coordinate. Quantum mechanics suggests it might be more or less, not fundamental at all, a product of entanglement, a consequence of observation, a shadow cast by something deeper, something we haven't yet named. But while the math battles in chalk-dusted rooms, you, the conscious observer, live the paradox. You are told the future is already written. Yet, at the quantum level, the page has not yet turned. You are told time does not pass. Yet your mind rides a wave of unfolding experience. What if both are true? What if you are a ripple in the block, a standing wave of awareness collapsing possibilities into a single thread? And what if that thread loops? In the next section, we confront the consequence of time as space. Because if the future already exists, and time can bend like space, then perhaps, just perhaps, it can also fold. We explore the terrifying beauty of time travel, where paradoxes don't break the rules, they reveal them. Welcome to the forbidden corridors of the block. If time is space, then perhaps we've been asking the wrong questions all along, because no one asks if you can travel through space. You simply go. You move from one point to another, and if time is just another dimension, a fourth axis on the grid of reality, then why not move through it as easily as you move from left to right? This is not just fantasy. It is baked into Einstein's equations. His theory of relativity does not forbid time travel. In fact, under very specific conditions, it quietly allows it. Take the twin paradox. One twin boards a spaceship and flies near the speed of light. The other stays on Earth. When the traveling twin returns, they have aged less. Time, for them, has passed more slowly. This is not a thought experiment. It is measured fact. Clocks on fast-moving jets tick slower. Satellites orbiting Earth require corrections for time, dilation, or your GPS would lead you astray. In these moments, time becomes slippery, elastic, subjective. It is no longer the same for everyone. It bends, it warps, and if it can bend, can it loop? Enter the idea of closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back on themselves. A traveler who takes this path could, in theory, return to their own past, not by magic, but by following the natural geometry of a warped spacetime. Kurt Gödel, the logician famous for incompleteness, offered such a solution to Einstein's equations: a rotating universe where time could curl into itself, a place where cause and effect melt into a circle. But such loops come with thorns. They breed paradoxes. You go back in time and prevent your own birth. You kill your grandfather. You hand yourself a piece of information with no origin, an idea that exists only because it was passed from you to yourself. These are not just storytelling gimmicks. They are logical catastrophes. They challenge the very coherence of reality. So what does the block universe say? It shrugs, because in a frozen block, there is no contradiction. All events are already embedded. If you travel back in time, you were always going to do so. If you handed yourself a note, you always did. No changes, no violations, only structure, eternal. In this model, time travel does not rewrite the block. It simply traces a path within it, one that was always there. This is the essence of Novikov's self-consistency principle. It states that any event that causes a paradox simply cannot occur, not because of rules, but because of logic. The block does not permit contradictions. Everything that happens fits. So, perhaps paradoxes aren't errors? They are clues, markers that we are pressing against the edges of what time actually island. Still, the possibility of time travel forces us to confront something deeper, not just whether we can change the past, but whether the past is something that can even be changed. Because in a block, the past isn't what happened, it is what island, just as real as the now, just as real as tomorrow. There is no becoming, only being. Time travel, then, is not a way to rewrite the story. It is a way to revisit the pages, to see them again, but never to tear them out. And yet, the very idea evokes something primal: regret, longing, hope, because if time is a place, then somewhere, right now, you are still a child. You are still in love. You are still holding the hand of someone who has long since vanished. Those moments are not gone. They are not memories. They are coordinates, still glowing in the structure of space-time. You cannot return to them. But maybe you never left. In the next section, we step away from paradox and turn toward peace. Because once you accept that every moment is eternal, something strange begins to happen. You start to see your life not as a journey, but as a pattern, a form, a shape that was always there. We explore what it means to live in the block universe, not to escape it, but to find meaning within it. If time is a dimension, not a flow, then your life is not a path you're walking. It is a sculpture you're embedded in, not unfolding, just existing, complete, always. This is the shift. This is the eternalist mindset, not a theory, not a belief, but a way of seeing. You are not becoming. You are. You are every version of yourself that ever was and ever will be. All moments are equally real, not just the ones you remember. The child playing in sunlight, the teenager collapsing in grief, the adult making mistakes, carving meaning from silence. They all exist, not in memory, but in reality. You are not a traveler on a journey. You are the journey. Every version of you, every emotion, every thought is carved into the structure of the cosmos, not fleeting, not fading, but éternel. This changes everything, because if no moment is lost, then no love is ever truly gone, no joy ever truly dies, no pain is ever meaningless. It all exists. It all matters. The block universe doesn't rob life of meaning. It reveals that meaning was never about what passes, but about what island. And what is everything, all at once, all forever. Ancient philosophies begin to echo with strange resonance. The Stoics said, "Live according to nature, accept fate, embrace what already island." In their writings, you can feel the shape of eternalism, a surrender not to despair, but to clarity. Buddhism teaches the illusion of time, of ego, of separation. The self is not a solid thread, but a collection of moments. And when you let go of clinging to any one of them, peace begins to bloom. These ancient insights now wear scientific armor. Their metaphors have become equations, their meditations, models. To live with the eternalist mindset is not to give up. It is to widen your vision, to hold in your mind not just the moment you're in, but the entire cathedral of your existence. You may be suffering now, but there is a version of you laughing. There is a version of you healing. There is a version of you still untouched by the weight of the world. And they are all real, all alive, all shining within the block. You are not chained to the now. You are not defined by the latest page. You are the whole story, every chapter, every breath. This does not mean you are powerless. It means your power is already written. The strength you dream of is not ahead of you. It is already part of you, waiting at a coordinate in spacetime. Unchanging, unshakable. There is peace in this, not in controlling the future, but in recognizing that nothing is lost. Not your greatest moment, not your deepest failure. They all are, and so are you. You can begin to forgive yourself. You can begin to forgive time, because time didn't steal anything from you. It only ever held it. Perhaps this is why music moves us so deeply, because every note, every harmony exists in the song all at once, but we experience it unfolding, and in that unfolding, we find beauty. Life is like that. The song is already complete, but you are hearing it one note at a time. The eternalist does not mourn the past. They honor it. They do not fear the future. They welcome it. They live in a moment not because it is now, but because it is theirs, and always will be. But not everyone accepts this view. Many resist it. They argue that time must flow, that only the present is real, that the future is not written. In the next section, we give space to those voices. We examine the challengers of the block, the thinkers who say, no, only now is real, the defenders of becoming, the believers in unfolding, and the war for time begins. Not everyone accepts the frozen cathedral. Not everyone bows before the block. To some, the idea that the future is already real is not profound. It is unbearable, a denial of everything it means to be human, to choose, to change, to become, and so, a quiet rebellion forms, not with weapons, but with philosophy, with physics, with protest, a movement not of denial, but of resistance. There are names for these challengers: presentists, growing block theorists, temporal emergentists. They look at the block and say, no, this isn't the whole story. Let's begin with presentism. It is the idea that only the present is real. The past is gone. The future has not yet happened. There is no eternal block, just a single, flickering flame. The now. This is how most of us instinctively experience time. We do not feel embedded in a four-dimensional sculpture. We feel like we are moving through something, moment by moment, cutting through the fog. The present is sharp. The past, memory. The future, mystery. Presentism honors that sensation. It elevates it to ontology. It says, if we feel time passing, then something must be passing. But physics pushes back. Einstein's relativity crushed the idea of an objective present. If simultaneity is relative, then so is the now. One observer's present may be another's past. Which one is real? Presentism begins to wobble. Then comes the growing block theory, à compromise. It says, the past and present exist. The future does not. The block is growing. Reality is being built, moment by moment, like a tree adding new rings. In this view, time still has a direction. The past is real, but fixed. The future is open, still unfolding. You are both a product of what came before and a participant in what comes next. Becoming is real. Change is not illusion. The block is not static. It's expanding. But relativity again causes trouble. If the future doesn't yet exist, How can different observers disagree about what is the future? Where does the line between real and unreal live? The growing block can't answer cleanly. Its edge is fuzzy. Its growth, undefined. Then there are those who argue that time itself is not fundamental, that it emerges from something deeper, something more primal than seconds and causality. Perhaps space and time are not the canvas, but the paint, the product, not the source. Physicist Carlo Rovelli suggests that time may not exist at all, at the most fundamental level. In his loop quantum gravity, time is not a variable. There is only change, relational chain. Things happen in relation to other things. No absolute clock, no flowing river, just the shifting dance of matter and energy. Julian Barber goes further. He proposes a universe of nows. Each moment is a complete configuration, a time capsule existing timelessly. We do not move between them. We simply are in one, then another, and another. There is no time, only illusion, stitched by memory and entropy. These are radical views, but they share a common thread: the rejection of the block's cold determinism, the search for a new language to describe becoming, a refusal to believe that all is already written. Yet none of these theories escape the shadow of Einstein completely. None of them fully unseat the geometry of spacetime. The math, the predictions, the measurements, they remain. So perhaps the truth is not in the camps. Perhaps it lies between them, or beyond them. Perhaps time is not what it seems, because reality is not what it seems. What if none of these views are completely right? What if each touches a facet of a deeper structure we have not yet named? What if time is not a dimension, or an illusion, or a product, but a byproduct? A symptom of awareness observing chain. A ripple in the interface between mind and matter. We are, after all, trapped inside the very thing we are trying to measure. How can a fish describe the water? How can a being made of time describe what lies outside it? In the next section, we lean into that mystery. We abandon physics, just for a moment, and ask a question that bridges the impossible. What if we are not in a block universe? What if we are inside a simulation? One where time is not a dimension at all, but a setting? You wake up, the sun is shining, the world feels real. But does it feel real because it is real, or because it was programmed that way? The idea that our universe might be a simulation was once a fringe hypothesis, a late-night dorm room musing, but no longer. Now, it's a theory taken seriously by physicists, philosophers, and technologists alike. Because the more we learn about the fabric of reality, the more it begins to look like code, mathematical, discrete, rule-based, and strangely optimized for consciousness. And if that's true, if we are inside some vast computational structure, then perhaps the block universe is not physical at all. Perhaps it's a read-only file, pre-computed, immutable, like a game map already rendered before the player begins. This is the simulation convergence, where the timeless geometry of the block collides with the cold logic of computation. In a simulation, time isn't something that flows. It's something that can be paused, rewound, fast-forwarded, copied, deleted, and what looks like motion is really just a sequence of state updates. Like frames in a video, from inside it feels like time. From outside, it's just a string of data points being accessed in a specific order. What if your life, your memories, your choices, your future are just calls to a database? What if every possibility is already stored, and what you experience is a lookup function, retrieving a moment that already exists in full? In this view, the block universe is not a prison. It's a program, structured, predictable, immutable, and that would explain the eerie precision of the cosmos. The fine-tuned constants, the quantized energy levels, the speed limit of light, a fixed processing ceiling, the Planck scale, the smallest measurable unit, like a pixel size, the quantum randomness seeded variables, perhaps, to prevent predictability, the observer effect, a rendering trigger, only collapsing the wave function when someone's watching. These are not just metaphors. They are possible explanations, clues that this reality is not analog, but digital, not chaotic, but curated. And if this is true, then time is not fundamental. It's a setting, a mechanic, a rule imposed on conscious agents to maintain the illusion of narrative. After all, what is the one thing every intelligent species must wrestle with? Time. It drives desire. It shapes story. It creates urgency, suffering, joy, and meaning. A timeless world would be sterile, but a time-bound simulation? That gives rise to the full spectrum of experience, from laughter to loss, from wonder to grief. This raises a final question, perhaps the most haunting of all. If we are in a simulation, who or what is running it? Is there a programmer outside time? A post-singularity intelligence? A civilization so advanced it can emulate space-time itself? Or is the simulation self-running, a loop with no origin, a cosmic recursión? We may never know, but the idea bends our understanding of the block universe once more. It suggests that determinism is not just a law of physics, but a choice of architecture. The future already exists because the simulation was rendered that way. Fixed, final, but only from the outside. From inside, you experience it as life. So perhaps this isn't a prison. Perhaps it's a theater, and time is the stage, and consciousness, the audience. Watching a story already written, but feeling it for the first time. In the next section, we confront that story's final scene. Because if all moments are eternal, then death is not disappearance. It is a coordinate, fixed, unmoving. We ask, what happens when the story ends? Where are we in the block? When life is over, what does it mean to die? In a universe where nothing truly vanishes, what does it mean to remember? In a reality where every moment still is? In the block universe, death is not an end. It is not an abyss. It is not even absence. It is a location, a final coordinate on your timeline, etched into the cosmic architecture, as real, as vivid, as permanent as your first breath. You are not erased. You are not gone. You are complete. To understand this is to stand at the edge of metaphysics, where science begins to tremble under the weight of meaning. In a block where time does not flow, then every moment of your life, your first steps, your first heartbreak, your greatest joy, still exists, not as a memory, but as reality. And so too does the moment of your death, not waiting, not approaching, simply there, frozen in space-time, like all others, accessible perhaps from a higher dimension, invisible from within, but always shining. In the greater whole, this raises a question we cannot escape. If your consciousness is only a spotlight, illuminating one frame at a time, then what happens when the spotlight reaches its final frame? Does it extinguish? Does it loop? Does it expand? In a frozen universe, what becomes of awareness? Some physicists argue that consciousness may leave no trace, that the mind, like a flame, vanishes when the body goes cold. But others see something stranger. They suggest that consciousness, whatever it is, may be woven into the block in a non-local way, not just in the brain, but in the structure of information itself. In this model, your awareness was never in time. It only appeared that way, as it lit up a sequence of frames, and when it reaches the last one, it simply stops illuminating. But the frames remain. The awareness that once was there is always there. You don't vanish. You simply are no longer updating. Your life, all of it, still exists. And if all moments are eternal, then you are immortal. In the only sense that may matter, you always exist somewhere in the block, a still life in space-time, a complete sculpture of a life once lived, forever part of the cosmic architecture. Some find comfort in this, others recoil, but it leads to a profound idea that death, like life, is not a transformation, but a fixed form, a final coordinate, no more tragic than the last note in a song. This also transforms how we think about memory. What if memory is not retrieving the past, but simply activating the neural patterns that correspond to a moment that still exists. You're not bringing something back. You're tuning into a part of your own block, a resonance, an echo, not of what was, but what island. And the soul? Science has no proof for it, no measurement, no equation. But if the soul is the pattern of you, not just your biology, but your awareness, your perspective, your place in space-time, then the block universe gives it a kind of permanence. A soul as a shape, not something that floats upward, but something that island, always, a frozen consciousness, etched into the geometry of everything. There is no judgment here, no reward, no punishment, just presence, just structure, and perhaps that is enough. Perhaps eternity does not need to be after death, only inclusive of it. In the block universe, nothing is ever truly lost. Not your mother's voice, not your child's first steps, not your last goodbye. All of it still glows. In the architecture of space-time, you cannot return to it, but you don't have to. It never left. The cosmos keeps everything, the joys, the failures, the love, the pain, the dreams. You are not a flicker, you are a frame, and you were never meant to be eternal. In time, you were always eternal. In space, in the final section, we step back one last time, and we ask, are we trapped in this block, or are we misunderstanding what it means to be free? We began with a question, a haunting, poétique, impossible question. Are we trapped in a 4D illusion? And now, after wandering through relativity, quantum riddles, consciousness, entropy, paradox, and death, we arrive here, still inside the block, still frozen in coordinate, still trying to understand what it means to exist. But perhaps the question was never whether we're trapped. Perhaps it's whether we're misreading what it means to be. We are so addicted to movement, to forwardness, to progress. We crave the story of becoming, of rising, of falling, of learning, of healing, but the block universe strips away all that flow. It gives us a sculpture, not a journey, and that offends something deep in us. The part that wants to believe we can change, the part that needs to believe we are free. And yet, what if the block is not a prison? What if it's a masterpiece? What if freedom was never about rewriting your path, but seeing it completely, with all its nuance, all its symmetry, all its scars and stars? What if the illusion isn't the block, but the idea that your life is incomplete? That it was always building towards something? That you had to become in order to matter? Maybe you already do. Maybe you already are, in every way that counts. Your love story, your failures, your last breath, they are all moments in the sculpture, and they are all equally real, equally yours. Maybe we were never meant to escape this illusion. Maybe we were meant to witness it, to live it, to feel its weight and wonder, not because it was temporary, but because it was eternal. Because if everything is already written, then your life is not a draft. It is not a rehearsal. It is not a test. It is a finished poem, and in that poem, you laughed, you hurt, you loved, you tried. That is not nothing. That is not failure. That is you, forever etched into the universe. There is beauty in being part of a block, because the block doesn't forget. It doesn't fade. It holds every moment with the stillness of infinity. You were never moving, but you were always meaningful. So ask yourself, do you need to escape time to find peace? Or can you find peace in knowing you've already been everything you were meant to be? The universe is not waiting for you to become. It already contains the version of you that found what you were seeking. Maybe you've already healed, already forgiven, already transcended. And somewhere in the block, right now, you are still staring at the stars, asking if the stars are staring back. You are still listening to this moment, and this moment is eternal. The illusion is over, or maybe it never was. Either way, you're here, and you always will be.